I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program today. Thank you so much for being with us. It is Friday, and that means it's Johnny Cash Friday. So, yes, here we go. So this is a day, like many of you know, where we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash music as we can, while at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day. Boy, oh boy, was it a big day yesterday at the Capitol in Little Rock. We told you this on Facebook Live right after it happened. Well, we actually did a Facebook Live hit right before the Arkansas House of Representatives went into session yesterday. Then we did another one right about the time they were wrapping things up. Boy, they covered probably every major Republican platform issue. I don't know if there's ever been a legislative body to do so much in one day. And what I mean by that is this. Okay, they passed the governor's income tax cut plan. Now, I've got a lot to say about that, and we're going to go over all of that. They passed this income. It's a straight, clean bill, income tax cut. They passed that. Okay, all right. Then they pass the anti-abortion law that would outlaw abortion in Arkansas, except for cases where the life of the mother's at risk. Outlaw abortion in Arkansas if Roe versus Wade is overturned. They would do this. What? I don't know what I'm supposed to look at. Okay, so that would happen. All right. And then we would what else do we have? We also had, we had the tax cut, we had the abortion issue. Oh, yeah, we had gun right clarification. So you had those three things, major things, right? And they passed. So the pro-life bill passed, the tax cut bill passed, the gun clarification of gun rights resolution passed. And, oh, by the way, you also had State Representative Dan Sullivan run his freedom of speech bill. It was Senator Bob Ballinger in the Senate, and Dan Sullivan ran that bill in the House to try to eliminate these college free speech zones and stand up for the First Amendment. Isn't that interesting? Those are four major things. Oh, and they also went ahead and approved Cecile Bledsoe's bill with the safe haven baby boxes. They did all that yesterday. It was crazy. And so we'll talk more about that at 6:30. All of it. I'll bring you the audio. I'll bring you the video. We'll get to it, all of that the rest of the program. At 7:33, we're going to be talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. He'll be on the program, so it'll be interesting to see, considering the national news that we're going over. I really want to go over here in just a minute, though. I want to remind you something. You know, that tax cut plan, the income tax cut the governor's doing, it's great. It's a good idea, right? But we've been talking about how it's a clean, standalone bill. You wouldn't have known that if you were listening to the debate yesterday, because everybody seemed to think that the income tax cut, the clean income tax bill, that they were all voting for it, or a lot of them were voting for it to negotiate on highways, to make sure they get what they want on highways. And, of course, the highway plan has tax increases in it, which is causing a lot of confusion. And we'll address that as well today. But kind of previewing what's going on right now, let me tell you this. President Trump looks like he's going to keep the government open, that he's going to sign the border bill, according to reports, that he's going to sign this bill that only gave him $1.3 billion. But then it's also being said that as soon as he signs it, he's going to declare a national emergency, which is making the left and some people on the right, too, kind of mad. The left is more mad. People on the right are more like, well, we need to be cautious because the Democrats might declare a national emergency on guns and go confiscate everybody's guns someday. And I guess that's true, but I think there'd be a very bloody result if that were to happen. What do you think would happen if that if they ever did that? A senior White House official familiar with the plan told ABC News that $1.375 billion would come from the spending bill Congress passed Thursday. $600 million would come from the Treasury Department's drug forfeiture fund. $2.5 billion would come from the Pentagon's drug interdiction programs, and through an emergency declaration, $3.5 billion from the Pentagon's military construction budget. Well, there you go. So here's the deal with this. Breitbart has, because they've been all over this border immigration thing for a long time, Breitbart has something that's interesting here that I think we need to consider. And this may be one of the reasons President Trump decides to declare a national emergency, because the bill he's been given allegedly has a poison pill in it. Breitbart.com reporting that the spending bill allows Mexican cartel-connected Texas counties to stop construction of the border wall. Okay? This is by Brandon Darby. A key provision in the spending bill being presented to President Trump for signing stipulates that the federal government gives specific Texas border counties the opportunity to derail any efforts to build barriers, fencing, or walls by simply opposing the construction of the border security measures. But many of the specified counties have a long and recent history of top officials taking bribes from the Mexican Gulf Cartel. Ultimately, the bill allows county offices with historic ties to the Gulf Cartel to stop U.S. border barriers from being constructed in the region. Local government officials spoke out against the building of additional border barriers and have relied on the judgment of local law enforcement officials. Just take a look at some of this stuff. So this is what President Trump would be signing, and I think this is why he is going to declare the national emergency. If you look at some of the counties that are listed, hang on, let me back up here. Breitbart News reported the bill being presented to President Trump a stipulation that would require the approval of local governments. Okay, the following are a few of the top law enforcement officials who were sent to prison or are currently being tried in corruption cases in these border counties. Former La Jolla police chief Giovanni Hernandez is facing various drug trafficking charges for allegedly helping Mexico's Gulf Cartel move cocaine and marijuana in order to pay for his campaign to higher office. Hernandez is still awaiting trial. Former Hidalgo County Sheriff Lupe Trevino just finished serving a 5-year prison sentence after pleading guilty to have taken money from convicted Mexican drug lord Thomas El Gallo Gonzalez in exchange for favors. During the investigation into Trevino's dealings with Gonzalez, close to 20 Texas law enforcement officials pled guilty or were tried and convicted for various corrupt activities dealing with drug trafficking. Trevino's son, Jonathan Trevino, is serving a 17-year prison sentence for being the de facto leader of a drug task force called Panama Unit that raided narcotics stash houses only to sell the seized contraband on the side. So we have the Mexican drug cartels bribing and bribing corrupt public officials on these border counties. You got to ask the question. I wonder how far, in terms of dollar amount, I wonder how far the reach of the Mexican drug cartel goes when it comes to bribing. I mean, if you're bribing local officials, is it possible that they bribe officials higher than that? Former Cameron County Sheriff Conrado Cantu is serving a 24-year sentence for his role in protecting Gulf Cartel members living in his county and their businesses. Former Starr County Sheriff, again, these are Texas counties, Raimundo Guerra, spent 5 years and 4 months in prison for his role in helping members of Mexico's Gulf Cartel move drugs freely through his county. Former Starr County Sheriff Eugenio Falcon Falcon, really? Spent Falcone. I'm sorry. Listen to me. Falcone spent 2 years in prison for bribery and conspiracy to commit fraud. Falcone was accused by the FBI of taking bribes from a Stark County bondsman in exchange for sending customers his way. However, according to news reports from the time, Falcone was known to have connections with Mexican drug lords and drug traffickers in the region. Falcone allegedly looked the other way since the drugs were moved through Stark County and were not distributed locally, as Texas Monthly reported back in 1998. Former Hidalgo County Sheriff Brigido Marmolejo. Yeah. Anyway, he was arrested and eventually convicted in 1994 after a 10-month-long investigation. Anyway, so these are again, Brandon Darby here, Breitbart News managing director and editor-in-chief of Breitbart Texas. So he specifically covers what's going on in Texas. So in the bill that Trump is signing, the Democrats put in a stipulation that specific Texas border counties, some of the ones I just mentioned, will just be able to locally oppose building the wall in their counties. It's pretty interesting. Now, is that going to fly when Trump declares a national emergency? I don't know. I mean, if in fact he does declare a national emergency, who knows? Also in this bill, according to reports, we have less detention of illegal aliens in expanded catch and release. Again, according to John Binder, a Republican-Democrat spending bill being offered to President Trump provides less detention space for border crossers and illegal aliens while expanding the catch and release program. So I don't think President Trump wants to shut down the government here, but I think if the Democrats are essentially giving him the middle finger. Now, see, all of this stuff what I'm telling you right now, the stuff that's actually in the bill, you're not going to hear from the mainstream media. The mainstream media, who, they have been so deflated this week because of the Senate Intel Committee in a bipartisan fashion saying that there's no evidence for Russia collusion. So they've been so deflated on this. They're not going to be able to contain themselves. They're going to all of a sudden, the media that praised Barack Obama for all of his executive action, the media is now all of a sudden going to be trying to stand up for the legislative branch of the of America, the Article 1 powers, and we're blah blah. It's going to be a giant joke. Now here's the deal, because I actually I don't like executive action. I mean, historically, I don't. I want the Congress to be able to act in everything else. However, the President of the United States is also the Commander-in-Chief, and also does and is able to command our military, all right? And if we are a country whose Commander-in-Chief is not allowed to build a wall at the border, then we are not a country. We simply are not. We might as well just pack it up and go home. This is a basic concept of civilization itself, where you should be able to control who comes in and out of your country and your borders, your boundaries. It's pretty much basic tenet. I keep saying that. Hey, did you hear that 1.4 million people, or 1.4 million households, rather, have dropped off of food stamps under President Trump? This is something that everybody should be. That's a lot of people. Because we're talking about households, not just people. 1.4 million households dropped off food stamps since President Donald Trump's first full month in office in February 2017. This is according to the USDA. Could that mean because people have more money in their pockets, more jobs, there's people working, they don't need government assistance as much? Yeah. I think that'd be the case. The fact of the matter is, a country's not going to be very prosperous if all of its people are depending on government. I mean, that's the truth. All right, folks, it's Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to take a break here. Going to be back here in just a minute. Again, we're going to have all coverage of what happened yesterday with the Arkansas House of Representatives. They voted on a gun resolution. They voted on an anti-abortion bill. They voted on tax cuts. They voted on freedom of speech and getting rid of free speech zones on college campuses. I mean, can you get any? Can you get any? I don't know. Those are all issues that I think a lot of Republicans follow constantly. Now, we're going to tell you about this tax cut bill. We're going to spend a lot of time on the tax cut bill because it's fascinating how many people were talking about highways, but it was actually a tax cut bill, but they were talking about highways the whole time. So this idea that it was a clean bill, which it is, but it seems like everybody was using their vote to make sure they get, from what I'm told, general revenue. The governor, doesn't want to give general revenue on highways. Anyway, we will wait, and we'll wait and get to that here in a minute. Don't go anywhere, folks.
This is the House of Representatives chamber in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., where in just a few moments the President will address the Congress on the State of the Union. Here is NBC News correspondent Edwin Newman.
President Nixon is delivering this State of the Union address on the third anniversary of his inauguration as president on January 20th, 1969. He's due in the House chamber in about 10 seconds, and his arrival is to be announced by the House doorkeeper, William Miller, known to everybody as Fishbait Miller.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
There is the President entering, apparently carrying his own copy of his address under his arm. He hands a copy to the House Speaker, Carl Albert of Oklahoma, copy to Vice President Agnew, with whom he shakes hands. There's Mrs. Nixon, who was in the chamber in the gallery about 5 minutes before the President arrived.
Thank you. I don't need it. Well, how are you? I never drink water when I'm speaking. They have it over here. Thank you.
My colleagues of the Congress, I have the distinct privilege and the high personal honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
You have to do it twice each time. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, my colleagues in the Congress, our distinguished guests, my fellow Americans. 25 years ago, I sat here as a freshman congressman along with Speaker Albert and listened for the first time to the President address the State of the Union. I shall never forget that moment. The Senate, the diplomatic corps, the Supreme Court, the Cabinet entered the chamber, and then the President of the United States. As all of you are aware, I had some differences with President Truman. He had some with me. But I remember that on that day, the day he addressed that joint session of the newly elected Republican 80th Congress, he spoke not as a partisan, but as president of all the people, calling upon the Congress to put aside partisan considerations in the national interest. The Greek-Turkish aid program, the Marshall Plan, the great foreign policy initiatives which have been responsible for avoiding a world war for over 25 years were approved by the 80th Congress by a bipartisan majority of which I was proud to be a part. 1972 is now before us. It holds precious time in which to accomplish good for the nation. We must not waste it. I know the political pressures in this session of the Congress.
Welcome back to the program. Has President Donald Trump wrecked your sex life? I don't mean to ask such a terrible question, but over at salon.com, you know, the crazy people that run salon.com, they've got an article here by somebody named Chauncey DeVega, and I'm not kidding you. I thought it was a satire. I thought it was an Onion piece or a Babylon Bee piece. Do what, Joe? Yeah. Chauncey DeVega doesn't even sound like a real, like, it sounds like the author himself is like satire. They've got this article here, Has Trump Wrecked Your Sex Life? Post-Trump Sex Disorder, they're saying is real. Now, you know, Trump derangement syndrome has actually been very good for the pockets, the pocketbooks of therapists in the Washington, D.C. area. There are a lot of reports that suggest this, but apparently women mostly are so upset with Donald Trump that they are less inclined to be intimate with their male partner. Yes, but this thing reads like it is like it's satire. It's unbelievable. Listen to this. Donald Trump has made America's mental health crisis much worse. Beginning with his presidential campaign and through to his third year as president, the United States has experienced an increase in anxiety, suicide, depression, and other mental health problems. The President of the United States is also a role model. His or her behavior influences the public. And as documented by Dr. James Gillian in his book, Why Some Politicians Are More Dangerous Than Others, Trump's assault on the country's mental health is part of a much larger pattern. The Republican Party and the conservative movement have for decades advanced an agenda which has hurt the overall health and well-being of most Americans. Donald Trump's negative impact on mental health extends to the intimate sexual lives of many people as well. I mean, is the left literally so dependent on the government that the President of the United States is going to affect them to such a degree mentally that it changes their sex life? I mean, you talk about people that depend on government. I mean, this is a whole new expansion of that definition, of that phrase, of what it means to depend on government. My goodness. What is post-traumatic Trump disorder? How does Donald Trump's misogyny and other unhealthy behavior towards women reflect deeper systemic cultural problems in America around gender, sex, and intimacy? In an effort to answer these questions, I recently spoke with Dr. Susan Block. I mean, it goes on. Okay, and then skipping down here, it's had a big impact. For some people, Trump's campaign and presidency has created a type of PTSD, what I call post-Trump sex disorder. Trump has created feelings of fear, loathing, and nausea. People just don't want to have sex. This would mainly be seen with women who are just appalled at how creepy Trump is. He takes what is often a positive male attribute of confidence and pushes it way over the line into a rape-like and rape-entitled kind of arrogance. Just, you've got to read this. This is the funniest thing. I actually was reading this in the gallery. But what does this say? Like, okay, so that means liberals that don't like Trump are having less children, which would mean less liberals and also less potential abortions.
It'll be great. There are more candidates for the presidency in this chamber today than there probably have been at any one time in the whole history of the Republic. And there's an honest difference of opinion, not only between the parties, but within each party, on some foreign policy issues and on some domestic policy issues. However, there are great national problems that are so vital that they transcend partisanship. And so let us have our debates, let us have our honest differences, but let us join in keeping the national interest first. Let us join in making sure that legislation the nation needs does not become hostage to the political interests of any party or any person. There is ample precedent in this election year for me to present you with a huge list of new proposals, knowing full well that there wouldn't be any possibility of your passing them if you work night and day. I shall not do that. I have presented to the leaders of the Congress today a message of 15,000 words discussing in some detail where the nation stands and setting forth specific legislative items on which I have asked the Congress to act. Much of this is legislation which I proposed in 1969 and 1970, and also in the first session of this 92nd Congress, and on which I feel it is essential that action be completed this year. I am not presenting proposals which have attractive label but no hope of passage. I am presenting only vital programs which are within the capacity of this Congress to enact, within the capacity of the budget to finance, and which I believe should be above partisanship. Programs which deal with urgent priorities for the nations, which should and must be the subject of bipartisan action by this Congress in the interest of the country in 1972. When I took the oath of office on the steps of this building just 3 years ago today, the nation was ending one of the most tortured decades in its history. The 1960s were a time of great progress in many areas, but as we all know, they were also times of great agony. The agonies of war, of inflation, of rapidly rising crime, of deteriorating cities, of hopes raised and disappointed, and of anger and frustration that led finally to violence and to the worst civil disorder in a century. I recall these troubles, not to point any fingers of blame. The nation was so torn in those final years of the 60s that many in both parties questioned whether America could be governed at all. The nation has made significant progress in these first years of the 70s. Our cities are no longer engulfed by civil disorders. Our colleges and universities have again become places of learning instead of battlegrounds. A beginning has been made in preserving and protecting our environment. The rate of increase in crime has been slowed, and here in the District of Columbia, the one city where the federal government has direct jurisdiction, serious crime in 1971 was actually reduced by 13% from the year before. Most important, because of the beginnings that have been made, we can say today that this year, 1972, can be the year in which America may make the greatest progress in 25 years toward achieving our goal of being at peace with all the nations of the world. As our involvement in the war in Vietnam comes to an end, we must now go on to build a generation of peace. To achieve that goal, we must first face realistically the need to maintain our defense. In the past 3 years, we have reduced the burden of arms. For the first time in 20 years, spending on defense has been brought below spending on human resources. As we look to the future, we find encouraging progress in our negotiations with the Soviet Union on limitation of strategic arms. And looking further into the future, we hope there can eventually be agreement on the mutual reduction of arms. But until there is such a mutual agreement, we must maintain the strength necessary to deter war. And that is why, because of rising research and development costs, because of increases in military and civilian pay, because of the need to proceed with new weapons system, my budget for the coming fiscal year will provide for an increase in defense spending. Strong military defenses are not the enemy of peace.
Big
they are
victory.
The guardians of peace.
Big victory yesterday when the House resolution to clarify gun rights, it passed the House yesterday on a voice vote. Now, to be clear, I was upset. I mean, I don't like voice votes, right? Even when they work to get things done that I don't like, or I'm sorry, that I do like. I'd rather have everybody on record all the time. However, generally, I will say that a lot of House resolutions end up being voice votes, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. The positive thing about this, though, is that this may very well lead, especially if they do something similar on the Senate side, which I'm told they will, this may very well lead to directly answer the opinion of the Attorney General when she said the legislator needs to clarify this. Well, here's not a bill, but this is a resolution clarifying, citing a court case, and, there you go. So it was a pretty big deal. Here's State Representative Brant Smith from yesterday.
Representative Wing, for what purpose?
To withdraw a leave request.
This was a weird moment. You skip ahead, Joe, just a little bit. This was Representative Smith's going there. This was weird where Carlton Wing was trying to withdraw a leave request, which is just a procedural thing they do when someone's absent. So anyway, go ahead and hit play.
It's withdrawn.
There we go.
Representative Smith, you're recognized to explain the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, this is a simple resolution, and it doesn't really do that much, but makes a pretty powerful statement. The title of it is To Clarify Gun Rights in the State of Arkansas. And with that, I would like to ask the Speaker that the resolution be read in its entirety.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution.
So again, this is a resolution to clarify gun rights. This is something that the Patriots VAC 746 has been saying for a long time. This is something that there was, recently in a court case last year, October, when it came time to, can you carry a weapon concealed without a permit? Can you carry a weapon open without a permit? And of course, the answer is yes. Prosecutors are saying the answer is yes.
Whereas citizens of the state deserve clarity in regard to gun rights and gun laws, and whereas in the recent Jamie Taft versus State of Arkansas case, the Court of Appeals gave judicial clarity and affirmed that Arkansas is a constitutional carry state with no permit required to carry a handgun, either unconcealed, or concealed. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 92nd General Assembly of the State of Arkansas that the House of Representatives acknowledge this decision for the clarity it provides to the citizens of the state in regard to gun rights.
Wow.
Thank you.
Straightforward, right?
Primary point in this resolution is simply that last statement, that the House of Representatives acknowledge this decision for the clarity it provides to the citizens of the state in regard to gun rights.
And then State Representative Brant Smith,
has explained the resolution. Would anyone like to speak against the resolution?
Interestingly enough, Charles Blake, the minority leader,
would anyone like to speak for the resolution?
The Democrat,
Representative Smith
wanted to ask him a question, and he was upset about it.
The question before the House is the adoption of House Resolution 1013. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Resolution is adopted.
There we go. All right, so stop
Mr.
right
Clerk,
there.
Please read
All
House
right.
Bill 1394.
Now, it was obvious that the no's were a little louder there, but you could also tell that the no's were far less people, okay? Now, this is why I don't like voice votes. I mean, everybody knows that I don't like voice votes. They don't. Yeah, I mean, I want roll calls. That's what I want. But typically resolutions they're non-binding. This is just to provide clarity. This is saying that the body, this is what the body wants, and it was clear. Now, had it failed, here's the thing. I don't know why the Democrats didn't call for a roll call. I mean, if they're so opposed to this resolution, because the Democrats are, anti-gun. They don't believe, they don't want people carrying weapons. They don't want people defending themselves. They just don't want you to do that. They don't. I don't know why, but they really just are so outside the mainstream thought of the average Arkansan on this. But anyway, it's a big deal that resolution now is official. I mean, it's done. It's over. It's a huge, huge victory. And I understand there's going to be a resolution now running through the Senate. And the Senate was very much watching what was going to happen there. Now, again, if it had been ruled that it had failed, I'm sure I am told that there 100% would have been an actual roll call on that vote. So anyway, regardless, big deal that this thing got out. A lot of people have worked really hard on it to get this thing out and to provide the citizens. Now, because here's the goal. I mean, fundamentally the goal on this was to help the average Arkansan. That was the goal. That was the strategy. The strategy was to help the average Arkansan when it comes to issues in liberty, in personal liberty, and your natural God-given right of self-defense. And hopefully this is the first step or second step in many to come that will help and stop this harassment, stop the misinformation that leads to harassment, and potentially, by the way, for you people who really, really, are big government types, you don't want to waste taxpayer. Well, I mean, some of you do, but you understand what I'm saying? You don't want to waste precious resources on lawsuits because people are wrongfully arresting other people for crimes, and you're wasting their time. And that's what has happened in several places across the state because there's just not the education as to what the law is now. So that was really, really positive. Next up, again, if you're just joining us, the 92nd General Assembly had a huge day yesterday, specifically in the Arkansas House of Representatives. They voted to clarify your gun rights in the positive. Very, very conservative thing. They voted on tax cuts. They voted on an anti-abortion bill. They voted on a freedom of speech bill when it comes to eliminating these freedom of speech zones on college campuses. They did all four of those things yesterday and more. Let's talk about the tax cuts, shall we? Let's go ahead and go to State Representative Joe Jett. He was the one carrying this Senate bill from Senator Jonathan Dismang, but it is the governor's tax cut bill, and I've been telling you that it is a clean tax cut bill. It passed out of the House yesterday, and the vote was 82-14. There were 9 Democrats that voted for this thing. And there were a couple Republicans that just didn't vote because they weren't happy with some of the information they were getting. One of those, State Representative Lori Rushing. We'll listen to her here in a minute. Here's State Representative Joe Jett from yesterday presenting the governor's clean income tax cut bill. Would bring it from 6.9 to 5.9 over 2 years. Listen.
Senate Bill 211 by Representative Jett to create the Tax Competitiveness and Relief Act of 2019 and to declare an emergency.
Representative Jett, you're recognized to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, this is the governor's tax cut bill. This is the final phase of a 3-phase tax cut program. Total cost of this bill is going to be $97 million. This tax cut will be phased in 3 years, 3 calendar years, 2 fiscal years. The first year is going to be top marginal rate goes 6.9 to 6.6. The second year is going to go from 6.6 to 5.9. The brackets in the top table will go from 6 brackets to 4 brackets the first year. The second year is going to go from 4 brackets to 3 brackets with a progressive tax rate of inside the table of 2%, 4%, 5.9%. The top marginal rate will be cut of 6% in the middle table will be cut from 6% down to 5.9%. When enacted, the 5.9% will finally make Arkansas be compared with surrounding states, be less than Louisiana, Georgia, South Carolina, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Missouri. In the 90th General Assembly, we cut $100 million from the middle table, or the middle income earners. That table went from a marginal top rate of 6.9% down to 6%. And once again, under this tax cut bill proposal, that 6% will go down to 5.9%. This year, the low-income earners tax cut from the 91st General Assembly that took effect January 1st of this year, the earners making less than $22,200 will pay a top marginal rate of no more than 3.4%. That is down from 4.4% from the previous years. Out of approximately $2.6 billion collected in income taxes, the bottom rate until now contributed approximately $110 million of that. That will now be $66 million. That is a 40% reduction in taxes to the to the bottom lower table. I think it's important to note, in the last 4 years with this bill, all Arkansans have seen a tax deduction along with the grocery tax cut this year of $61 million. Arkansas's top margin rate finally has been reduced from 6.9% down to 5.9%.
So, okay, so let's remember that figure, okay? Because as the whiteboard says, tax math. Go ahead, stop.
Explain the bill.
We got to remember that. So, $61 million. The grocery tax cut is being reduced $61 million. At least that's the number he's using, meaning a loss of revenue to the government, $61 million that they're going to lose because the grocery tax, a bill that went into effect 10 years ago to gradually reduce the grocery tax, is about to, be I guess, zero? It's going down. So they're counting that in as a revenue reduction, something that was passed a long time ago. Just wanted to let you guys know that. And I do feel the need to remind you that they were considering reinstituting the grocery tax, but there was a Republican primary, and then that got put out, and so they didn't want to go that direction. So that's kind of why we're here. Okay. But you got to have a memory of this stuff, and I'm cursed with having to remember, and I do feel cursed sometimes, by the way. So, would anyone like to speak for or against the governor's tax cut plan? Go ahead, Joe. Hit the play button.
Anyone like to speak against the bill? Would anyone like to speak against? Representative Rushing, you're recognized to speak against the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. I think all of us know that this tax bill is probably a really good bill, and I am down here to speak against the bill, but for one reason and one reason only, and that is that I have requested some information from the governor's office and have still yet not to receive that information. There was a group of us that we had gotten together and talked about receiving our information and making some requests. I'm not making a request, I'm only requesting information and numbers that I asked for on Monday and still have not received. I know that several of you in the group have decided since then to vote yes on this bill because you did get what you want. You got your letters, you got your numbers, you got everything that you requested, but I didn't. And for me, it means something to hold tight to what colleagues promise each other. And when we get together and we say that we want to make sure that we receive the information we request to make informed decisions. And I'm going to stand by my word because I didn't receive my information that I requested.
State Representative
I would do it for you.
Laurie Rushing.
And all I'm asking is that you do it for me. All I want is the numbers. Now, I will say that the governor sent me a text about 5 minutes ago saying, what do you want? Well, I requested it on a public forum on Monday night. And so it's not like he doesn't know what I want, but I want it, and I just want it to make an informed decision. So I would ask that just out of consideration for this body, when we request information, that we can receive that information. I would request that you vote no. I'll probably vote yes for it if we voted on it next week after I get my information. But I just want to make sure that I have an informed decision for me and my constituents, because that's what it's about. We're here for the people of Arkansas, and we need to make sure that we're making informed decisions and not just being pressured into making decisions. And so again, I would ask that you please vote no, just out of the courtcy of this body.
All right, the State Representative Laurie Rushing, she's speaking against the bill.
Would anyone like to?
Just hold it right there, Joe, because we're about to get right back in. She's speaking against the bill there. saying that she didn't get the information. She wants to make an informed decision. I think we can all respect that you want to make an informed decision. She also says that the governor just texted me asking me, what do you want? Which was interesting, a little interesting disclosure there in front of in front of the world. Anyway, just hold it there, Joe. Let's go back to the clip, and we're going to listen to State Representative and the Majority Leader Marcus Richmond, who's going to speak for the bill. And I want you to listen. This is a clean tax cut bill, but State Representative Richmond talks a lot about highways in his support of the bill. Listen to this.
Speak for the bill. Representative Richmond, you're recognized to speak for the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. There's a couple of reasons why I decided to vote for this bill several days ago. One of them is somewhat personal in that I'm one of those individuals that has an S corporation, depends on an S corporation for family business, family livelihood. And what I'm able to do with that S corporation, because just like an LLC, that money flows through me, through the business, and then through me, and I'm responsible for the taxes on it.
This is actually really good.
Any tax break that I can get means that I have the flexibility to hire another person, I have the flexibility to pay a better wage, and I have the flexibility to continue doing profit sharing, which we do in our business with our employees when we have the good quarters. It allows me to help my employees. And if you ever look at a map and see where I live, I don't have to compete too much for employees because we're out in the middle of nowhere. And it is important that our business continues so that 10 people that work there at that business are able to have a good life. This is going to help me do that. This is going to help my family do that. So that's one reason. The other is I certainly respect what Representative Rushing is saying here. Everybody has concerns. She has legitimate concerns. She wanted some questions answered, and she hasn't gotten those answers yet. But I'm not sure that that is justification for holding this up at this time, and this is why. At the very beginning of this, when we come and said we need something done on highways, because everybody in here realizes that Arkansas is in desperate need of having work and improvements on our infrastructure in this state. The initial position was no general revenue, no this, no that. But the governor moved. He moved to the tune of about $85 million for general revenue. We said then that, well, we want it to come out, this tax cut, come out of the Senate end. That's where it came. We want it put in writing, the highway bill. He's put it in writing now. We tell him what we want, and then we move the goalpost on him. I would just say that, we have come pretty close. We may not score a touchdown with this particular deal, but we've gained about 35 yards, and it's 1st and 10 on the 12-yard line. We've done all right so far. So I would ask you to go ahead and vote yes on this bill so that we can move forward, because a vote no and a continued vote no and this bill failing, then they may get a tax cut that we can't afford, possibly. I haven't seen the numbers, but I worry about it. And we certainly will not have any highway bill that includes general revenue, which means you're going to have to, if you have any improvement on highways, it will take a very large tax on gasoline and whatever else they can dream up. So consider this. It's important that we move forward so that we can also take care of our highways.
All right, stop. That was the Majority Leader, Republican State Representative Marcus Richmond speaking on the governor's income tax bill. And it appears, and to me this seems like a new thing, that the House of Representatives have been negotiating with the governor trying to get him to use general revenue for the highways. This bill passed 82-14, and it seems to me that Marcus Richmond, I'm just speculating here, is under the impression that the tax increases on gasoline would be much higher if they didn't vote for the income tax cut. Now, I know that's very confusing because it's confusing to me. Again, tax math, but the highway tax plan does have tax increases in it. And again, the question is, at the end of the day, will the people of Arkansas be paying more in taxes, the same in taxes, or less when it comes to our tax burden? It's Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to take a break. We're going to pick up. We got a lot more to get to. Don't go anywhere.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799.
And there could be no more misguided set of priorities than one which would tempt others by weakening America and thereby endanger the peace of the world. In our foreign policy, we have entered a new era. The world has changed greatly in the 11 years since President John Kennedy said in his inaugural address, "We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty." Our policy has been carefully and deliberately adjusted to meet the new realities of the new world we live in. We make today only those commitments we are able and prepared to meet. Our commitment to freedom remains strong and
Back about 18 and 20.
All right, so I want to continue with this coverage of what happened yesterday in the House when we come back, so don't go anywhere. More on the tax cut legislation. I want you to hear Democrat Minority Leader Charles Blake and what he had to say about the tax cut. He was railing against how this is a tax cut for the most wealthy and typical stuff, typical Democrat talking points, but he also had some other things to say that I found interesting. Also, the Arkansas Child Protection Act or the pro-life bill, Mary Bentley did a great job presenting it. And there was some interesting debate. You know, Republican Dan Douglas rose to speak against Jason Rapert's pro-life bill, which was interesting and emotional. It was kind of a lot of emotion on both sides yesterday when it came to talk about trying to save the unborn. Folks, we've got one more hour coming your way next on this Johnny Cash Friday.
And there could be no more misguided set of priorities than one which would tempt others by weakening America and thereby endanger the peace of the world. In our foreign policy, we have entered a new era. The world has changed greatly in the 11 years since President John Kennedy said in his inaugural address, "We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty." Our policy has been carefully and deliberately adjusted to meet the new realities of the new world we live in. We make today only those commitments we are able and prepared to meet. Our commitment to freedom remains strong and unshakable. But others must bear their share of the burden of defending freedom around the world. And so this then is our policy. We will maintain a nuclear deterrent adequate to meet any threat to the security of the United States or of our allies. We will help other nations develop the capability of defending themselves. We will faithfully honor all of our treaty commitments. We will act to defend our interests whenever they are threatened any place in the world. But where our interests or our treaty commitments are not involved, our role will be limited. We will not intervene militarily, but we will use our influence to prevent war. If war comes, we will use our influence to stop it. And once it is over, we will do our share in helping to bind up the wounds of those who have participated in it. As you know, I will soon be visiting the People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union. I go there with no illusions. We have great differences with both powers. We shall continue to have great differences. But peace depends on the ability of great powers to live together on the same planet despite their differences. We would not be true to our obligation to generations yet unborn if we failed to seize this moment to do everything in our power to ensure that we will be able to talk about those differences rather than to fight about them in the future. And as we look back over this century, let us in the highest spirit of bipartisanship recognize that we can be proud of our nation's record in foreign affairs. America has given more generously of itself toward maintaining freedom, preserving peace, alleviating human suffering around the globe than any nation has ever done in the history of man. We have fought 4 wars in this century, but our power has never been used to break the peace, only to keep it, never been used to destroy freedom, only to defend it. We now have within our reach the goal of ensuring that the next generation can be the first generation in this century to be spared the scourges of war. Turning to our problems at home, we are making progress toward our goal of a new prosperity without war. Industrial production, consumer spending, retail sales, personal income, all have been rising. Total employment, real income are the highest in history. New home building starts this past year reached the highest level ever. Business and consumer confidence have both been rising. Interest rates are down. The rate of inflation is down. We can look with confidence to 1972 as the year when the back of inflation will be broken. Now, this is a good record, but it is not good enough. Not when we still have an unemployment rate of 6%. It's not enough to point out that this was the rate of the early peacetime years of the 60s, or that if the more than 2 million men released from the armed forces and defense-related industries were still in their wartime jobs, unemployment would be far lower. Our goal in this country is full employment in peacetime. We intend to meet that goal, and we can. The Congress has helped to meet that goal by passing our job-creating tax program last month.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're in the middle of our coverage of the 92nd General Assembly. Yesterday was a big day. They had they clarified gun rights. They voted for a tax decrease in the income tax, and they also voted for pro-life legislation that would outlaw abortion in Arkansas, except in cases of the life of the mothers at risk. If Roe versus Wade is overturned, it was called an abortion trigger law. We'll hear audio from the House floor yesterday on that. They also tried to, or they passed. State Representative Dan Sullivan went to the well and passed a bill aimed at trying to stop these free speech zones on our college campuses, which is really, really a good thing. So it was a really interesting day yesterday. But we're towards the end of the last hour, we were in the middle of the tax debate. The tax cut bill did pass 82-14. There was some opposition to it. 9 Democrats voted for it, and this is what's strange. Let's go. I got a feeling that the minority leader, Democrat State Representative Charles Blake, has got to be kind of disappointed with his caucus when 9 Democrats cross the picket line and vote with Republicans. This is what State Representative Charles Blake had to say yesterday in dissenting. He did not support the governor's income tax cut. Listen.
We've heard a lot of concerns, even from Representative Rushing, that we're talking about getting information and what are we going to get to support of this bill. We have a bill that's going to give 76% of the benefits to the top 1%. And we've talked about highways,
class warfare,
and how and what are we going to make sure that we want the governor to support highways. I want to make sure you all can go back home and tell your constituents that you chose to vote for a high-income tax cut in exchange for them to vote for increasing their sales tax, because that's what we're doing. The highway plan that I have seen says that we're going to refer out a sales tax to the people. So we're going to make a cut for $97 million to go back and have them vote on improving their own highways. If we don't have the courage, if we don't have the gumption to come here and make tough votes for our people about increasing taxes, about having new taxes, but we're fine with talking to the governor and have a quid pro quo about voting for a tax cut that benefits about 12,000 to 15,000 people in this state. If you're ready to go home and tell your people that, if you're ready to go home and say the tough work, we're going to make you do it. We're going to make you vote to increase taxes. But we'll have a $97 million tax cut where $75 million goes to the top 1%. If you're comfortable with that, be ready to answer those questions. I'm not here to oppose the governor whatsoever. I'm here to make this tax cut better. I'm here to say, hey, let's slow down. Let's get those questions answered, as Representative Rushing asked. Let's get some dynamic scoring. You spent 15 months and had a tax subcommittee, a tax reform committee, and we scrapped that plan. But let's pass this tax plan in 3 weeks. I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable having a tax cut where we don't know what the benefits are, where we don't know what the actual reduction in our general revenue is. And this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. I'm talking to my colleagues as well. Go home, explain to your people why you took this vote and why you referred out a sales tax. It's a tough decision.
All right.
But we've been sitting here about 30,000 people each to make these decisions.
That's State Representative Charles Blake. Now, that was fascinating. I don't think I've ever heard for a Democrat call for dynamic scoring when it comes to a tax cut. A lot of times Democrats want to call for anyway, that was interesting to me. But he raises some interesting questions and interesting points about cutting taxes and then referring a new vote to the people to maintain the existing sales tax rate because it's set to expire. It's set to sunset. And so he raises an interesting point there. I will say this, though, that under the current highway plan, they are going to kind of make a tough decision because they are going to vote to create a new tax on gas and diesel, a new tax at the wholesale level. So gasoline will be taxed twice, once at the wholesale and then another at the pump. Now, it's going to translate to about 3 to 6 cents increase at the pump. Conduit for Action, conduitforaction.org, they actually have a really good report on this about part of the proposal. Headline here, automatic increase in motor fuel tax proposed by governor. And that is... this details how they're going to index this gas tax increase. They're going to index it to where it's going to rise potentially every single year. And I want to get back to some more audio here, but anyway, very interesting stuff from Democrat Charles Blake. But I will tell you, this bill, which was a clean bill just on paper that lowers the income tax, the high bracket from 6.9 to 5.9 over 2 years, it did pass 82 to 14 with 9 Democrats. Even after he said that, 9 Democrats voting for it, which is extremely interesting as well. To get to that number, they had to get to 75 votes in order for this to pass because you have to have 3/4 in order to tweak with the tax code, to tweak with existing taxes. But there was a lot of talk about highways in a bill that is clean because they're using this to negotiate on highways. But the current highway plan still has plans to increase taxes. So it's all really, is it cosmetic? I mean, do we speculate that some of this is cosmetic just to get that on the map? They talk about the map. The Governor Hutchinson talks about the map. Right now, we're the highest income tax around our region. That 6.9 sticks out like a sore thumb, and they claim that if we can just get it to 5.9, that will become more attractive. Okay, so let's say we do that. We're 5.9, and now that map looks a lot different. We're a lot more competitive, according to what people say. But we already have the highest gasoline taxes around, and we're about to contribute to more than that. So what about that map? Now, I mean, maybe that map just isn't, no one cares about that map as much as they care about the other map. I guess that's possible. But anyway, we'll have more on this on Monday for sure. Another bill that was considered yesterday had to do with abortion. Yesterday on the program, we had Senator Jason Rapert on, and he talked about his bill, SB 149, an abortion trigger law that would outlaw abortion. It passed 72 to 20 in the House. Yesterday was Valentine's Day, of course. State Representative Mary Bentley carried the legislation on the House side. Let's listen to what she had to say yesterday from the House of Representatives.
Senate Bill 149 by Representative Bentley to create the Arkansas Human Life Protection Act and to abolish abortion in Arkansas and protect the lives of unborn children.
Representative Bentley, you are recognized to present your bill.
Colleagues, today I'd like to start the representation of this bill with a quote from our Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's why I'm bringing forth this bill today. We believe that every American has the right to life, no matter how small that person may be. The psalmist states in Psalm 139, You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit them together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous, how well I know it. You watched me as I was formed in utter seclusion, as I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. It's God who has created life, and it's God who has given us the right to life. Just because man passed a law to say that abortion was legal does not make it right. There has been a moral outcry.
All right, so State Representative Mary Bentley, she did a really good job presenting this bill. And I will tell you this much. As soon as she started talking, it got so heavy in the room. I mean, it was just heavy. And there was a few people that spoke for it, against. There's a Democrat that spoke against it, of course. And she said, what's her name? Can you scroll down? What's her name? Godfrey. So State Representative Godfrey spoke against the bill, and she said things like she knows all the Bible verses. This is what she said. Go ahead, click on. Let's listen to what she had as a Democrat speaking against this bill. I thought it was interesting that she knows all the Bible verses. And yet she still voted against it, and she identifies herself as a Christian too, which I thought was, well, I mean, is that we got some buffering problems. The thing is like, what do you do with, if you know all the Bible verses, like Mary Bentley there reading from Psalms, you could also go read in Jeremiah. You could also read, Senator Raper talked about, God hates those who shed innocent blood. What do you, if you know all the Bible verses, okay, well then how do you reconcile? Like, what do you do with them then? You know what I mean? Like, what do you do with them if that's the case? So, do you just ignore them? Anyway, Joe's queuing this up here. We had a buffering problem here. So as soon as you get that, yeah, there we go. Go ahead, click on that, Joe, and let's. Looks like the Arkansas House website having some problems here, buffering. Tell you what, let's go ahead and take a break now because we're running out of time here, and I want to get to some of this. We'll take a break now, and we'll be back in just a moment. It is Johnny Cash Friday, by the way.
The historic monetary agreements that we've reached with the major European nations, Canada and Japan, will help meet it by providing new markets for American products, new jobs for American workers. Our budget will help meet it by being expansionary without being inflationary, a job-producing budget that will help take up the gap as the economy expands to full employment. Our program to raise farm income will help meet it by helping to revitalize rural America, by giving to America's farmers their fair share of America's increasing productivity. And we also will help meet our goal of full employment at peacetime with a set of major initiatives to stimulate more imaginative use of America's great capacity for technological advance and direct it toward improving the quality of life for every American. In reaching the moon, we demonstrated what miracles American technology is capable of achieving. And now the time has come to move more deliberately toward making full use of that technology here on Earth, of harnessing the wonders of science to the service of man. I shall soon send to the Congress a special message proposing a new program of federal partnership in technological research and development, with federal incentives to increase private research, federally supported research on projects designed to improve our everyday lives in ways that will range from improving mass transit to developing new systems of emergency health care that could save thousands of lives annually. Historically, our superior technology and high productivity have made it possible for American workers to be the highest paid in the world by far, and yet for our goods still to compete in world markets. Now we face a new situation. As other nations move rapidly forward in technology, the answer to the new competition is not to build a wall around America, but rather to remain competitive by improving our own technology still further and by increasing productivity in American industry. Our new monetary and trade agreements will make it possible for American goods to compete fairly in the world's markets, but they still must compete. The new technology programs will put to use the skills of many highly trained Americans.
After my miscarriage in 2011, I walked alongside other women and heard their stories.
All right, so
And you and
stop
I
right
can
there.
say-
This is State Representative Godfrey. Sorry, we were broadcasting that audio on the radio, but we had a little technical difficulty on the stream there, but everything's fine now. Anyway, what she said was, that she knows the Bible verses, and she's talking about the pain that women experience, when she went on to talk about a miscarriage and things like that. It's a very, very heavy, difficult issues, but she's still speaking against a bill that would end the deaths of children for birth control reasons. I mean, and that's what we're talking about here. And, there are extenuating circumstances. There are terrible things that happen. But, folks, 60 million children. I was really astonished that, and look, they're tough issues. State Representative Dan Douglas, a Republican, he rose up and he said, I can't support this bill, because of something that happened to him, to a family member concerning this. Let's listen in. Let's listen. What did State Representative Dan Douglas say? Why he could? But of course, it passed. SB 149 passed 72-20. Listen in.
I'm pro-life, but I am pro-humanity too.
Pro-life.
I feel like this bill goes too far. No exceptions for anything except the life of the mother, and certainly the life of the mother has to be protected. But let me tell you, whenever this hits home, one of these issues hits home, it's a little different story. It's easy to sit here and say, oh, we shouldn't allow this or we shouldn't allow that. But it's when it's happening in your own family, it takes on a totally different meaning. This last summer, my niece, who was pregnant with her second child, she had a little girl, 2 years old, and she became pregnant again, and she was carrying a little boy. And they were so excited and so happy. And everything was going good until she went to get her ultrasound. And when they did the ultrasound, they said, there's a problem. There's not enough amniotic fluid. I didn't know a lot about this. Dr. Cloud can probably fill you in, or others. But the way it was explained to me, the first part of gestation, the mother produces the amniotic fluid, and afterwards the baby starts producing some of the amniotic fluid through its kidneys and urinary system. Upon further and closer examination, they found that the baby did not have proper kidneys and had no bladder. The doctor explained to her she could carry the child throughout the remainder of gestation, the entire 9 months, and deliver that baby alive into this world. But once it got here, once it was delivered, it would live 2 to 3 days, and those 2 to 3 days would be miserable, excruciating, agonizing for that baby and for the mother. And let me tell you, my niece, having to carry that baby through those last weeks of gestation, knowing that when she delivered it, it was going to die a horrible death. There's something called humanity and stopping suffering. This bill goes too far. No provisions for these genetic defects that, yes, sometimes, Representative, I understand they say something is wrong, the heart, it may not survive, it will not survive, and it does. But
Exactly.
There are times also that it will definitely not survive, and who are we to set in judgment of these women making a decision between them and their physician and their God above? It is their right to do that, and not ours.
Okay, so that's State Representative
Douglas
Dan Douglas.
against the bill.
He got pretty worked up there at the end. Again, he says he is. He says he's pro-life, but he's speaking against a bill that would outlaw abortion in Arkansas if Roe versus Wade is overturned, with exceptions for the life of the mother. Of course, you see why he explained why he was against it. Here's my situation with this. We are having this discussion because of technology, because we now have the technology to see something that was really never ever. I mean, for a long, long time, you did not know anything about your baby for most of human history. You didn't really know what you were going to get until you got it. Until you delivered it. And so what we're talking here is, so we have the technology to see what are the probabilities and that sort of thing. We have the technology also to end the life beforehand, and then that's what abortion is. And here's the thing: it has to stop. It just has to stop. We're talking about murder here. And it's not perfect because the world's not perfect. So you're still going to have circumstances, and and I say this full well knowing that something like this could hit home personally at some point, and all of us know that. But in 2017, Arkansas, there were over 3,000 abortions in the state of Arkansas. Now, folks, the genetic anomalies or the rape and the incest are 1 to 2% of abortions. And you can still take contraceptive measures if you are raped, as long as you go to the emergency room and report it. You can still take Plan B. You can still take those things if you want to under this piece of legislation. At some point, we have to understand and just recognize, and it actually is chilling, and it chills me to the bone to think about the amount of blood that is on this nation of innocent life, these innocent children that's on this country that we have allowed since 1973. And so for me, it is a black and white issue at this point. I mean, that's my conviction, because it has to stop. It has to stop, folks. It's not something that can continue. And with what New York is doing, arguing for abortion up until delivery, what North Carolina governor said about, we'll make the baby comfortable and then decide. Arkansas, I would just tell you this, Arkansas House of Representatives, Arkansas Senate, Jason Rapert, Mary Bentley, the rest, we should be very proud today that the state of Arkansas made this bold pro-life move. The bill passed 72-20, mostly along party lines. We're going in the different direction than the state of New York.
And skills that might otherwise be wasted. I will also meet the growing technological challenge from abroad and it will thus help to create new industries as well as creating more jobs for America's workers in producing for the world's markets. This second session of the 92nd Congress already has before it more than 90 major administration proposals which still await action. I have discussed these in the extensive written message that I have presented to the Congress today. They include, among others, our programs to improve life for the aging, to combat crime and drug abuse, to improve health service, to ensure that no one will be denied needed health care because of inability to pay, to protect workers' pensions rights, to promote equal opportunity for members of minorities and others who have been left behind, to expand consumer protection, to improve the environment, to revitalize rural America, to help the cities, to launch new initiatives in education, to improve transportation, and to put an end to costly labor tie-ups in transportation. The West Coast dock strike is a case in point. This nation cannot and will not tolerate that kind of irresponsible labor tie-up in the future. The messages also include basic reforms which are essential if our structure of government is to be adequate in the decades ahead. They include reform of our wasteful and outmoded welfare system, substitution of a new system that provides work requirements and work incentives for those who can help themselves, income support for those who cannot help themselves, and fairness to the working poor. They include a $17 billion program of federal revenue sharing with the states and localities as an investment in their renewal, an investment also of faith in the American people. They also include a sweeping reorganization of the executive branch of the federal government so that it will be more efficient, more responsive, and able to meet the challenges of the decades ahead. 1 year ago, standing in this place, I laid before the opening session of this Congress 6 great goals. One of these was welfare reform. That proposal has been before the Congress now for nearly 2.5 years. My proposals on revenue sharing, government reorganization, health care, and the environment have now been before the Congress for nearly a year. Many of the other major proposals that I have referred to have been here that long or longer. Now, 1971, we can say, was a year of consideration of these measures. Now let us join in making 1972 a year of action on them. Action by the Congress for the nation and for the people of America. Now, in addition, there's one pressing need which I have not previously covered, but which must be placed on the national agenda. We long have looked in this nation to the local property tax as the main source of financing for public primary and secondary education. As a result, soaring school costs, soaring property tax rates now threaten both our communities and our schools. They threaten communities because property taxes, which more than doubled in the 10 years from 1960 to 70, have become one of the most oppressive and discriminatory of all taxes, hitting most cruelly at the elderly and the retired. And they threaten schools as hard-pressed voters understandably reject new bond issues at the polls. The problem has been given even greater urgency by 4 recent court decisions, which have held that the conventional method of financing schools through local property taxes is discriminatory and unconstitutional. Nearly 2 years ago, I named a special presidential commission to study the problems of school finance, and I also directed the federal departments to look into the same problems. We are developing comprehensive proposals to meet these problems. This issue involves 2 complex and interrelated set of problems: support of the schools and the basic relationships of federal, state, and local government in any tax reforms. Under the leadership of the Secretary of the Treasury, we are carefully reviewing all of the tax aspects. And I have this week enlisted the Advisory Committee on Intergovernmental Relations in addressing the intergovernmental relations aspects. I have asked this bipartisan commission to review our proposal for federal action to cope with the gathering crisis of school finance and property taxes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program today. We really do appreciate it. We are awaiting contact with Congressman Bruce Westerman. I'm sure it's kind of a busy day, though. You know what I mean? I know after yesterday with the House and everything. Anyway, but we are hopefully we'll get to talk to him today, and if not, certainly some other time. Let's dive right back into it in the meantime. For those of you who are just joining us, yesterday in the Arkansas House of Representatives, it was to me a fascinating day. They clarified gun rights. They voted to end abortion. They passed an income tax cut, and they voted for a bill to eliminate free speech zones on our college campuses, because college campuses tries to, say you can only have your freedom of speech in this area, that sort of thing. That was Senator Bob Ballinger and State Representative Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan's the one that, presented the bill yesterday in the House. Anyway, what can you say about that? That's like a huge day. It's like those are some really, really popular campaign issues for Republicans. Now, I will say this. The interesting thing, one of my biggest observations yesterday was the standalone income tax cut bill. For it to be a standalone income tax bill, during the debate, there was a lot of talk about highways and negotiating highways, meaning, well, we got the governor to give us general revenue for highways, so we need to vote for his income tax bill. It's all very, very interesting, and we're going to, that's why the whiteboard this week has said tax math, because we've got to figure out at the end of the day, will the people of Arkansas's tax burden be lower? Will it be the same, or will it be more? Joining us now, we have Congressman Bruce Westerman on the line. Bruce, it's always good to have you on, sir. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, good to be with you, Paul. I didn't hear the Johnny Cash music this morning.
Well, I know. We were kind of already we were a little bit into the segment, but hey, we'll get you some on the way out of the segment. How about that?
That'll work. I hear the legislature may put Johnny Cash's statue up here in the Capitol.
Boy, I think that's that would be amazing, and that's what I want to happen. But I don't know. I actually haven't heard an update on that in a while. Because
I just heard a little bit about it a while back, but not anything recently.
Yeah, we get two, right? And right now, I don't think anybody even remembers the people that are up there now. So that'll be interesting to see what happens.
I know because I give Capitol tours, but I bet most Arkansans don't know.
Well, so Congressman Westerman, let's get your thoughts on everything that's going on right now with the budget deal. The president now saying that he's going to sign it and avert a government shutdown. Leader McConnell in the Senate saying that he'll also declare a national emergency. What are your thoughts on everything? What's the environment up there right now?
Well, it's like deja vu all over again. We've got a spending bill. Here we're middle of February, dealing with a spending bill that should have been passed last September. And I think people forget that when we get into these situations that seem to be the normal rather than the oddity anymore. And it's why I continue to harp on the fact that we've got to get those spending bills done on time so that we don't get in these situations. I wrote an op-ed a couple of weeks ago about this, but what happens, Paul, is we've got 12 spending bills. Everybody knows right now that the federal budget runs out September 30th of 2019. We should be working on those appropriation bills, getting them through the House and through the Senate. You get to debate them, you get to offer amendments, and you obviously don't get everything you want on those, but at least they go through the process, and you can do the responsible thing and fund the government at the end of the day. What has happened, though, is the senators, Democratic senators who are in the minority now, know that they can't even bring one of those bills up for a vote without cloture. So we'll pass the bills in the House, get them over to the Senate, and they'll just sit there. This past year, we actually got 3/4 of the spending approved in September, and which left this 25%, which this bill yesterday was about $330 billion, was what was left to approve. But that could have been done last September, but for political purposes, the senators wouldn't allow cloture on the bill. So you go into a continuing resolution, and then it gets to an expiration date, and you go into another continuing resolution. And then here we are, middle of February, and we get a bill that was released at, I think, 1 a.m. in the morning, and the Senate voted on it yesterday, and then we voted on it last night. So a 1,200-page bill with no time to read it. But it's more the principle of the way we're doing business up here. And now we've put the president in a position where he's got a responsibility to, as the commander-in-chief of the chief person responsible for our security, of not having the funds from Congress to do what he believes is needed to keep our country secure. So now you're getting into constitutional issues on whether he can take money that's been appropriated for one thing, declare an emergency, and use it for another thing. It's not a good situation. I don't think it's the way our founders intended for the government to be operated.
No, and yet I think there's, on our side, there's a lot of support, I think, for the president to just build the wall. I mean, do the thing, take the money from the Pentagon, do whatever, use the military, and get it done. And then, of course, a lot of people are wondering, okay, well, what kind of precedent does that set? But I mean, there is a national emergency law, back in the 70s, where presidents can declare national emergencies. Obviously, it's going to be challenged in court. But this is what I've been saying, Congressman Westerman, is that I do believe it is a crisis. I do believe it rises to the level of an emergency. And there's some people that don't, but that's just because they don't realize, just the media has not been reporting the crisis at the border for decades. And, when you take into account the human trafficking, the sex trafficking that's going on, that in and of itself should spark bipartisan unions about trying to stop this.
We passed bills in Congress and gloat about them, about preventing human trafficking. And the one thing we could do to probably affect human trafficking as much as anything would be to get better security along the border. And then the drug problem is, I think people are starting to understand how bad it is, but I don't think people really have got their hands around how horrible fentanyl is. And most everybody, if you'll start talking to people, everybody knows someone who's died of an opiate overdose, or is in a rehab program, or has a messed up life because of opiates. And the amount of fentanyl that is coming across the southern border is astonishing. I mean, it's enough lethal doses to kill our population several times over. And it just is continuing to grow. And it drives me crazy when people say we're seizing these drugs at the designated border crossings. Well, no duh, because you've got dogs there and you've got scanners and you're able to detect them. But when somebody's in the middle of nowhere walking across the border with nothing deterring them, you're not going to catch them and apprehend drugs there. So it's there's not a lot of common sense going into what being portrayed in the media along the southern border.
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine, a colonel, a couple days ago, and he was saying that this fentanyl is, it's pretty much close to a biological weapon in terms of, I've read stories where SWAT teams go in to make a bust, and they end up being hospitalized because of exposure, meaning they're just breathing the air where the fentanyl is, and it's like airborne, and they have to go to the hospital. That's crazy.
And I've heard that where they're cooking meth. Now, fentanyl, 2 milligrams is a lethal dose. You inhale that, and you're probably not going to make it. You can get too much of it on your skin, and it'll take you out. And these drug cartels are sprinkling it on the heroin to make the heroin more addictive. And a lot of these this illegal fentanyl is being made in China, and I don't know if you saw this, but the Chinese government basically said they were issuing the death penalty for anybody caught making fentanyl over there.
Okay.
That's their public policy. But it's being made in China and shipped in to the U.S. But it's a epidemic. It's doing great harm to our country, and it is a national security issue.
Absolutely. I mean, I really do think just the southern border. You know, I with what's going on, Bruce, in New York, what's going on in Virginia when it comes to, you know, pro-life issues. You know, I think the liberal progressive guy Bill Maher, you know, he said, trying to make fun of Republicans, that our issues are the wall and the womb. But you know, I tend to agree with him, but I think those issues at this point we've gotten so far away from. Well, we can't even really talk about esoteric conservative governance. We have to talk about just basic tenets of civilization, protecting life, and a nation doing what it can to ensure that the most vulnerable, the unborn, are allowed to have a chance at living. And once they're here, that the nation itself would not abdicate its responsibility to control who comes and goes from a sovereign country. And so, yeah, right. I mean, those are really big Republican issues right now because the other side is against them.
Yeah, I hope we're seeing the dying gasp of this pro-death movement, this abortion movement. I think the science is proving out with the technology that we got that people understand that there's life in the womb. And, you know, this guy from Virginia saying, you know, let the child be born and the mother can have a little bit of time to figure out if she wants to keep the baby or not. That's straight up infanticide. There's no other way to categorize that. And saying you can take the life of a baby, you know, seconds or minutes before that baby is going to be born is it's embarrassing to me that that's happening in this country.
Yeah.
You go to countries that we think are horrible on human rights, and a lot of them have stricter abortion laws than we have, or than that's being proposed by some of these folks in New York and Virginia.
So last week, we didn't get to talk to you about last week's State of the Union address, but what were your thoughts on it?
I thought it was a great address. I thought the president did an excellent job, and I thought he talked about issues that needed to be covered. You know, I've not been to that many State of the Union addresses, but it was by far the best one I've been to, and I think it was very well received. I really appreciated the way he commemorized the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and he had the three gentlemen there who were on the beach at D-Day. He started the speech with that, talking about what real greatness is, and then at the end he came back with the Holocaust survivor and worked that back in. And one of those gentlemen who had landed on D-Day actually had helped free that Holocaust survivor from Dachau. It was a very emotional moment, reflective time to think about just how great this country really is and the accomplishments. You know, seeing the astronaut there who had
Buzz Aldrin,
you know, been to the moon. Buzz Aldrin. Yeah, I kept thinking Buzz Lightyear, but Buzz Aldrin.
Hey,
and,
you know, well, we're talking with.
I've met him a couple of times.
We're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman on the State of the Union, though. I thought it was a well-written speech, and it was delivered good too. But he really did a good job of kind of putting the Democrats, this vicious opposition. You know, he talked about the realities of Venezuela right before he condemned socialism. You know, he talked about paid leave, whether you support paid leave or not, you know, but he mentioned specifically children and how parents need to bond with their precious children, and that's why paid leave is important in this country. And he does that right before he talks about abortion. You know, so he gets the Democrats, it's like, yeah, paid leave, parents and their kids. Oh, by the way, kids are also important when they're in the womb. And then on the illegal immigration subject, right before he talked about illegal immigration in the border, Congressman Westerman, he talked about how they had just all come together for criminal justice reform. So it's like, here's a positive. Right. We came together and solved it, and we need to come together and solve this again. Of course, that doesn't appear to be what they're doing, but I just thought it was really a very well-written speech.
I do, too, and I think he played them in his hand there. The only time that all the women in white stood up and clapped was when they were clapping for themselves, based on his congratulations to him for having more women in Congress than ever before. They couldn't clap for World War II veterans. They couldn't clap for America, but they could stand up and clap for themselves. And I found it ironic that the person they loathed the most had them up clapping and cheering and chanting USA.
Yeah. I thought that was very interesting as well. Generally, I also thought...
You brought up...
go ahead.
You brought up the president's comments on life, and that's probably the strongest words I've ever heard from a president that I can remember on the sanctity of life. And to me, that was a highlight of his speech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how all children reflect the holy image of God. I agree. I don't think I've ever heard that from a president.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of them that have believed that in the past, and it was just kind of understood in society, I think. But I'm glad that he reminded us of that and reminded the nation and the world of that in the State of the Union.
Congressman Bruce Westerman, I appreciate the work you're doing, sir, and it's always a pleasure to have you on the program, and we'll talk to you again soon, okay?
Yeah, wait till you hear about the new Green Deal. Oh, my goodness.
Right. Yeah, that's a gift. Yeah. I think that's a gift to Republicans, actually.
Yeah, it's actually scary because they're moving the bar so far that it's going to make things that would have seemed nuts not quite as nutty, because that is so nutty.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we appreciate it, sir.
All right, I hear a little Johnny Cash coming in the background.
Yeah, we're full circle. All right, Congressman Bruce Westerman, you be safe. Folks, we're going to take a break.
Later in the year, when both commissions have completed their studies, I shall make my final recommendations for relieving the burden of property taxes and providing both fair and adequate financing for our children's education. These recommendations will be revolutionary, but all these recommendations, however, will be rooted in one fundamental principle with which there can be no compromise. Local school boards must have control over local schools.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
As we look ahead over the coming decades, vast new growth and change are not only certainties, they will be the dominant reality of this world, and particularly of our life in America. Surveying the certainty of rapid change, we can be like a fallen rider caught in the stirrups, or we can sit high in the saddle, the masters of change, directing it on a course we choose. The secret of mastering change in today's world is to reach back to old and proven principles and to adapt them with imagination and intelligence to the new realities of a new age. And that's what we have done.
Welcome back to the program.
I've laid before the
Real quick, we're wrapping things up. I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for starting the beginning of your weekend with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, Conduit News. Joe and I were just having an interesting conversation, trying to sum up, like, how do we sum up the Democrat position now on abortion? They're pretty much like what, in a way, with infanticide. What are they, like Pharaoh, like kill all the newborn Hebrew babies? Or they're like Herod, kill everybody 2 and younger just to make sure, because it's an inconvenience that there might be a king that was born. For those of you who are not familiar with those biblical references, you might be familiar with Star Wars Episode 3, when Anakin, in his transition to being Darth Vader, walks into the youngling room where the young kids are training to be Jedis, turns his lightsaber on, and it cuts away to the next scene. That's essentially the Democrat Party position. That's what it's becoming on abortion. The youngling slaughtering scene from Star Wars, where Anakin's becoming Darth Vader. For those of you that need a more pop cultural reference to figure out exactly what the Democrat Party issue is, the plank when it comes to abortion. That's all the time that we have for today. I'm glad that Arkansas passed the pro-life measure, doing away with abortion in Arkansas, with the exception of the life of the mother, if Roe versus Wade is overturned. By the way, if anybody knows where Ruth Bader Ginsburg is, feel free to text us, 870-275-9799. We'll be back next week on Monday with bells on, ready to bring you the news. Arkansas, be safe.